Tonight, the top 10 surprising facts about Canada's oil industry that the media and the Liberals won't tell you. It's January 29th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
So this week, the Trudeau Liberals announced new global warming regulations that will apply only to oil pipelines from Western Canada, not to foreign oil that's imported to Canada, and not to any other industry in Canada, like Ontario auto manufacturers, for example. Oh, and not to the Trudeau Liberals themselves. Here's a picture of some of the limousines of Liberal cabinet ministers while they were announcing their war on carbon dioxide this week. They didn't walk to the press conference. They didn't bike or drive in an electric car. They didn't even just drive in their chauffeured limos and park. They literally had their chauffeured limos running for 90 minutes while they went inside to make their global warming announcements. So the cars would be toasty warm as soon as they got back into them. That's how serious these Liberals are about global warming. These people are charlatans, and they're know-nothings. The Liberals have 4 MPs from Alberta, but they gave the Natural Resources Ministry to an MP from Manitoba, Jim Carr. He's a career politician who, before entering politics, was an oboist. That's someone who plays an oboe. It's sort of like a clarinet seen here. That's the top talent Trudeau thought he'd hand the most complicated, important economic file in Canada to. Yeah, what could go wrong? These people claim to be science-based and evidence-based in their policies. They even have a new science minister, Kirsty Duncan, who calls herself Doctor, but her degree's in geography. She falsely called herself a Nobel Prize winner and only stopped doing that after she was exposed as a liar. And listen to this gorgeousness. Just listen.
You are trying to evade your responsibility on what you can do on climate change. You want to blame it on everybody else.
You don't know me. What if we just do nothing?
If we do nothing, we could be in real trouble. By 2050, every second day could potentially be a smog day.
Yeah, doctor, carbon dioxide does not cause smog. Carbon dioxide is colorless, odorless. It's something all humans and animals exhale. One more clip from the doctor.
Even if we were to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 70% today, our planet is still going to warm by 2100 by 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. That's enough to bring on an ice age.
Got it. So global warming is going to cool the earth into an ice age. She's the science minister. I guess she explains the hard parts to Justin Trudeau. Come to think of it, I'd rather take the professional oboist. So here, let me tell you 10 basic facts about oil and gas that you would never know if you relied on the fake Nobel laureates and oboe players and substitute drama teachers who are now wrecking our economy, because they surely don't know these facts themselves. Let's start with fact number 1. Despite all the blather at global warming conferences, world oil consumption is growing, and it will continue to grow. When I wrote my book, Ethical Oil, 5 years ago, the entire world consumed 88 million barrels of oil a day. Today, that number is 94 million. It is not shrinking. It is growing because countries like China and India don't want to be poor anymore. They don't want to bicycle around anymore. They don't want to shiver in the winter and be hot in the summer. They want to live like us. And that's called progress. Fact number 2, investment in oil and gas is growing too, despite the current reduction in prices. Sort of obvious, because for every barrel of oil that's used from reserves, you've got to explore to discover another barrel, often using new technology. Low prices are a signal to investors to put their money elsewhere, but that has a natural balancing effect. As demand grows and starts to push prices back up, the lack of investment today will mean tighter supply in a couple of years. OPEC itself predicts that $10 trillion worth of investments will be needed to meet demand in the next 25 years. Those numbers sound staggering, but they're believable. I mean, right now, the 3 big pipeline proposals in Canada alone, Northern Gateway to BC, Trans Mountain to BC, and the Energy East, they're collectively about $35 billion worth of investment. that the Liberals and the NDP are basically telling to go elsewhere, to go to Russia or the US or OPEC. Fact number 3, the leftist concept of social license is a crock. Do you know what I mean? Here's Justin Trudeau saying that phrase.
Even though governments get to grant permits, ultimately it's only communities that grant permission.
That's his definition of social license, to replace legal rules and objective standards with giving any protester a veto. Environmentalists love this concept of social license because they get to replace real questions like, is a pipeline safe? With, how does a pipeline make you feel? The lie that Trudeau and Rachel Notley tell about social license is that it's necessary in order to sell oil to our customers. Really? China, India, and the world's other huge oil customers, do they really care about social license in Canada, what a bunch of left-wing activists say in Canada? They will buy their oil from literally anyone. They do. Saudi Arabia, Iran, the most despicable regimes in the world. Social license isn't about convincing customers to buy an essential commodity like oil. You don't need to advertise oil or sell people on oil. It sells itself. Social license is about paying off shakedown artists like Montreal Mayor Denis Coderre. Fact number 4, Canadian pipelines are not the problem. They're a rounding error. The enormous effort by US-based, US-funded extremists to demonize Canadian pipelines is laughable if you take them at face value that they're worried about oil spills or whatever. Here is a map of all the crude oil, petroleum, and gas pipelines in North America. Look at how many there are, for example. Right under the Gulf of Mexico, that's an amazing feat of engineering right there. You can barely see through all the spider webs in parts of the US, but Canada has just a few strands. Does it really make sense, all the hundreds of millions of dollars targeting Canadian oil pipelines? No, unless your real goal isn't to save the environment, but rather to sabotage Canada's oil industry and give an economic advantage to our US or OPEC competitors. Fact number 5, here's one more map, like the last one. I'm taking this from the US Department of Energy's indispensable website. It shows all the railways and tanker ports in North America that are used to supplement pipelines. Now, it goes without saying that while safe, railways and tanker ships are not as safe as a pipeline that's buried, that doesn't move, that if there's a problem can immediately be shut off. Look at all those oil-by-ship terminals along the Mississippi and other US rivers. Look at all the railways in North Dakota. That's at the top in the middle there. That's oil that has to move by rail because Obama rejected the Keystone XL pipeline. I'm sure it's purely a coincidence that the owner of one of the biggest oil-by-rail companies, the Burlington and Santa Fe Railroad, is owned by his friend Warren Buffett. Obama would never favor a Democratic Party crony over the national interest and safety, would he? Now, because of the blockage of pipelines, oil by rail, which was rare before 2012, has become the biggest thing on rails. It's more expensive to ship that way. It's less safe. It's crowding out other commodities that need access to railways like Saskatchewan wheat. But Warren Buffett doesn't mind. He's getting rich. I don't blame the death of 47 people in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, when an oil train derailed and exploded there. I don't blame those deaths on Barack Obama. But it is a fact that that oil would have gone by pipeline instead of by rail had Obama approved the Keystone XL pipeline. Fact number 6, all of this debate is fake. It's not about real pollution. It's about the fake pollution of carbon dioxide, which is not pollution. It's what people exhale and plants inhale. The whole thing is a monstrous trick, but even if you believe that carbon dioxide is evil and that it's causing the world to heat up, well, Canadian oil, even oil sands oil, has a lower carbon footprint than oil from OPEC regimes when you take into account the entire chain of production, from well to wheels, as they say. Don't take it from me, take it from the Congressional Research Service. Here's their study of all the carbon produced from the moment you poke a hole into the ground to the moment you turn the keys in your ignition. Let me quote. Compared to selected energy and resource-intensive crudes, well-to-wheels greenhouse gas emissions for Canadian oil sands crudes are within range of heavier crudes, such as Venezuelan bachaquero and Californian Kern River oil, as well as lighter crudes that are produced from operations that flare associated gas, like Nigerian Bonny Light. Let me translate out of the jargon. The oil sands are no more carbon emitting than oil from Venezuela, Nigeria, or California. By the way, put Iraq in there too. Fact number 7, for years, the left has demonized the oil sands, saying it caused Dutch disease in the rest of Canada, by which they meant The oil industry was so strong, it was driving up the Canadian dollar, and that hurt manufacturing in places like Ontario by making Ontario products more expensive to export. Well, take a look.
It's by definition the Dutch disease. The Canadian dollar is being held artificially high, which is fine if you're going to Walt Disney World, not so good if you want to sell your manufactured product because the American client, most of the time, can no longer afford to buy it. We've hollowed out the manufacturing sector.
Well, problem solved, right? Oil is only $30 a barrel now, and so our currency has plunged 71 cents, probably going lower. Has been this low for pretty much a year, but Ontario companies continue to shut down and move to the U.S. because of Ontario taxes and Ontario electricity prices, Ontario regulations. It's got nothing to do with the Alberta oil industry. But Alberta was a handy scapegoat, wasn't it? But hey, you enjoy that low dollar that's giving us $7 a head cauliflower and other expensive imports of fruits and vegetables and electronics. And hey, have you been on a vacation to the States lately? Yeah, enjoy the purchasing power of your peso. Dutch disease problem, though, totally solved. So who's behind all this BS? This is point number 8, I guess. Lots of naive people, lots of know-nothing ideologues who truly believe that oil is evil, or at least Canadian oil is. But what about that? Canada only produces about 4 million barrels of oil a day. The world produces more than 20 times that. So why is everyone picking on Canada? Well, listen to the former Secretary General of NATO saying his evidence for who's really behind the NGOs and lobbyists against Western oil and gas. In his case, he's referring to fracking. Take a listen.
Russia, as part of their sophisticated information and disinformation operations, engage actively with so-called non-governmental organizations, environmental organizations working against shale gas, obviously, to maintain European dependence on imported Russian gas. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, do you think that Vladimir Putin loves Canada and Stephen Harper, who humiliated him? Or does he loves our oil and gas competition to him? Do you think he only undermines European oil and gas alternatives? Yeah, me neither. Fact number 9, wind energy is a sham. It's called renewable energy. The wind, that is. Of course, to make a wind turbine takes enormous non-renewable resources, steel, concrete, rare earth metals for the magnets, etc. But the wind itself, I guess, is renewable, but that's not really the most accurate way to describe it. It's not renewable versus unrenewable energy. As Alex Epstein says, it's reliables versus unreliables. On any given day, the vast majority of wind turbines in the world just don't spin. Or when they spin, they all spin at once, but we need energy when we need it, not unreliably. One of the most wind turbine defaced countries in the world is the United Kingdom. More than 6,000 awful skyscraper high monstrosities, wrecking what for centuries were some of the prettiest places in the world to live. But the comedy and tragedy of that is that these wind turbines just don't work most of the time. I've got a little app on my iPhone called Grid Carbon. I don't know why. It's made by some environmentalists in the UK. At any given moment, it tells you how much of the UK's electricity is from these ghastly wind turbines. I just checked a moment ago, and it's actually, the number today is one of the highest I've ever seen, 5,500 megawatts out of 13,500 megawatts of installed wind turbine power. So today, only 60% of wind turbines in the UK weren't spinning. I've seen the number not spinning as high as 90%. Like I say, they're called unreliables, more accurately. You need to have coal or natural gas or nuclear or something else to back them up when they don't spin. The one thing they do reliably, though, is make billions of dollars for connected friends of the government who get taxpayer subsidies to build them. All right, fact number 10. The last decade of prosperity in Canada, it's coming to an end. Rachel Notley's carbon tax in Alberta, plus her other taxes and regulations, Trudeau's coming carbon tax, Trudeau's new pipeline restrictions. After a while, the world's investors are going to get the message. They will put their $10 trillion of new money into OPEC countries or Russia or the United States. It's already happening. Western Canada will be raided, but that's called gilling the goose that lays the golden egg. Oh, Trudeau and Notley will get their money, but you know, we've shown you before that Quebec wrings out $21 billion a year from transfer payments, of which $10 billion a year from equalization, in large measure from the oil provinces. So Quebec and the Atlantic provinces too were always equalized up, right? That's what equalization means, to level things, but we would level the poor provinces up. But the Liberals and the NDP, they want to level the provinces down, to equalize down. And they're succeeding. Alberta now has an unemployment rate the same as the national average. The first time that's happened in more than 30 years. Oil projects are being canceled by governments or by companies. They're being canceled. No one's going to invest in Alberta in this state. How long do you think that $21 billion a year of transfers can keep flowing to Quebec if all the money to pay it has just left Canada? Now, demonizing the oil patch is fun when you're plundering someone else's money, which is going on right now. But after a while, oil investors get the message and they take their money to safer jurisdictions that respect free enterprise more, like China. Seriously, Canadian projects are pulling out of Alberta and moving to China and Nigeria and Iraq. Think about that. All of Catherine McKenna's blather about global warming, all of Notley's blather about social license, all of Jim Carr's oboe playing. Hey, good luck building a country on that once the oil patch is gone. Those are 10 facts you won't hear from the mainstream media because the media is too busy cheering the attack on Alberta, the province they've always hated and wanted to take down a peg. Stay with us for more on an all-energy show.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta. Go to thedestroyers.ca to sign up for your free copy today.
Welcome back to the program. Our theme today is energy. It was the subject of dueling press conferences in Ottawa this week. Here, let me start by showing you a clip from Catherine McKenna, the new Liberal Environment Minister, describing how she's going to now assess infrastructure for global warming, but only if it's oil and gas infrastructure. Here, take a listen.
When we look at this, we will consider a whole range of factors. What are the economic benefits? What are the impacts on the climate? What does the public had to say? What do the Indigenous peoples have to say? And then a decision is made on that basis. That is no different than has been made in the past. That it's always been at the cabinet's discretion to make decisions about projects with significant effects.
Not applying to foreign OPEC oil imports or, frankly, to any other industry. They would never put a global warming test on, say, a new automobile factory in Ontario or a Bombardier airplane or train factory in Quebec. Well, here's Candice Bergen, the Conservative Party critic, responding to the Environment Minister.
Let's be frank, pipelines are the basic infrastructure for natural resources. So to give some context to this discussion, when we're talking about any other kind of basic infrastructure, whether it be high-speed rail, whether it be clean water, all kinds of infrastructure projects that go on across this country that have to go through approval processes, in principle, they are supported by the sitting government. But for some reason, infrastructure surrounding natural resources is a problem, an ideological problem for this government.
That's Candice Bergen, and it's tough to dispute. The Energy East pipeline is in the news lately. It started off as a $12 billion infrastructure proposal, which would make it immediately the largest construction program in Canada, in fact, in Canadian history in today's dollars, in nominal dollars. But that price has actually grown to $15.7 billion as the proposing company has made hundreds of changes to the proposed route based on local consultations. So you're talking about a $16 billion-dollar infrastructure project, all of it private sector money, none of it from taxes or deficits, and this government is throwing down new restrictions. Well, joining me now via Skype from New Brunswick is Brian McDonald. He's the Conservative MLA for Fredericton West Hanwell, and he's the leadership candidate for the PC Party of New Brunswick. He joins us now via Skype. Great to see you again, Brian.
Great to see you, Ezra. Always a pleasure.
Well, just to remind our viewers, a couple years ago, you and I went on a fact-finding trip down to Pennsylvania to see how that state that was hit really hard by the decline in steel and coal industries in America has had a huge revival because of shale fracking. So our viewers will remember you from that. But today we're talking about Energy East. Tell me what the view is in New Brunswick, because you're the destination province of this pipeline and oil. I talk about it from the west. Can you give me some thoughts from the east?
Well, Ezra, this pipeline is absolutely essential to the future of Atlantic Canada in general, and in New Brunswick in particular. What this means is this pipeline will provide a steady supply of Canadian oil to our refinery in St. John, which is one of the most significant refineries in North America. And as well, there'll be capacity to make sure that refinery is operating to its maximum, but also there'll be the opportunity to ship that oil to world markets from the port of St. John. So it's an incredible opportunity to maintain the viability of the refinery that exists right now in St. John, to fuel that with Canadian oil, and also to give the port of St. John a boost and to make sure that Canadian oil can get to world markets on salt water.
Yeah, it used to be that foreign OPEC oil was cheaper than Canadian oil for reasons of logistics and infrastructure, but now Western Canadian oil is cheaper. So that massive St. John refinery you're referring to, it's the biggest refinery in Canada, which a lot of Albertans might be surprised to learn. It would mean enormous savings just of their feedstock, plus all the new opportunities to refine it, to ship it, to export it. This would turn St. John into a energy boom town on a permanent basis, 1 million barrels a day. You're a conservative, but let's give credit to your rivals. This subject went to a vote in the New Brunswick legislature, and if I recall, it was unanimous. The big three parties all supported Energy East. Am I remembering correctly?
You're bang on, Ezra. My concern has been, the current government does a lot of talking, but not much doing. And my concern about this issue is they've said for a long time they support Energy East, and I love to hear that, and I applaud them every time they say it. The challenge is I'm not sure what they're doing to make sure it happens. As you know, the project has been held up for reasons arguably beyond anyone's control. But the reality is, as you know, and you played the clip at the beginning, that this current Liberal federal government has brought in just this week some significant measures that will delay this project. And my concern about the Gallant government here in New Brunswick has always been that they're saying the right thing, but they're not doing it. And Gallant himself just was in Davos with the Prime Minister. He was previously in Paris. These issues have come up. And I'm not sure that he's fighting New Brunswick's corner on this. I'm concerned that, as you know, you can say you support something, but unless you put your shoulder to the wheel and make sure that the things that need to happen, then things won't happen. It won't get done. And with this pipeline in particular, as you know, as you pointed out, it's not public money, it's private money, so that's great news. So that the government doesn't have to ante up with a checkbook, but in this case, they have to do a lot of work to support the project. And that means they have to make sure that there's no obstacles in the way of the project. And all I see from Liberal governments around the country is these increasing obstacles to make sure that this pipeline never becomes a reality.
Yeah. Brad Wall, the Premier of Saskatchewan, has been very vocal. He's been diplomatic in regards, he hasn't been rash, he hasn't been a bomb thrower. But for example, when the Montreal Mayor, Denis Coderre, senior Liberal, badmouthed, trash-talked the pipeline, Brad Wall very gently poked back and say, you don't mind the $10 billion in equalization from this oil, do you? So at least he showed some fighting spirit. What has your Liberal Premier done or said? I haven't heard it. Maybe it's being reported in the local New Brunswick media, but this is a national fight now. Rachel Notley is missing in action, but I understand that. She's an anti-oil new Democrat premier. Brad Wall is presenting. Can you tell me what, if anything, the Liberal premier of New Brunswick has said publicly or done? Is there anything happening from the premier of New Brunswick?
Well, I'll tell you, his messaging on this has been good. He has said he supports it, and I support him in that effort for sure. But like I say, words are cheap, and it's actions that I'm looking for. And I have not seen him building the kind of coalition that Brad Wall is building. You know, he needs to be out there actively campaigning for this pipeline. And more than that, more than using his words, I mean, he has to use his words, and he should be doing that, which he hasn't been in this case. But I also think he needs to demonstrate some action. I mean, I would like to see, like we say, this is fundamentally a private investment, but in this case, I think government has a role to get behind it. And I'd love to see him dedicate some resources, put a team of experts together that are going to ensure that this pipeline moves forward as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Yeah. Because that will actually result in tremendous economic activity in the province of New Brunswick, not just the building of the pipeline itself and the ongoing operations of it, but also, as I've said, that supply of cheaper, ethical Canadian oil to our own refinery and the great opportunity for the Port of St. John.
Yeah. You know, I mean, he should hit the road, not just to Ottawa, but to Montreal. I mean, there's a lot of French speakers in New Brunswick. They should communicate the benefits and the truth about this pipeline en français in Montreal to counter the disinformation from Denis Coderre. I mean, in Alberta, there's not a lot of French speakers. There are in New Brunswick. They should be deployed doing all the talk shows in Montreal and Quebec and dispelling the myths and reminding Quebec that the alternative is OPEC conflict oil. All right, Brian, last word to you. Tell me your hopes. I mean, you're running for the PC leadership in New Brunswick. I spent some time with you investigating fracking. Here you are promoting the Energy East pipeline. In a minute, can you outline your economic vision to get New Brunswick back on track and bring prosperity back to the province? Give me a minute of your elevator pitch if you were trying to sell someone on you as the leader.
Well, thank you, Ezra. I mean, New Brunswick is an incredible province. It's a province with incredible resources, both natural resources and human resources. And if we want to find our way to prosperity, we have to grow the economy of New Brunswick. As you know, a lot of provinces have a similar problem, but the economy of New Brunswick is shrinking, our population is shrinking, our population is aging. And so what we need to do is create here in New Brunswick an economic engine that's going to reverse that flow, that's going to bring our children back home from working around Canada and give them jobs right here in the province of New Brunswick. And key to that, Ezra, is this concept of responsible resource development. So we have to take the resources that we have, and some of those are natural gas resources. There's also our traditional industries of forestry, fisheries, and agriculture. All those resources that we have here in this beautiful province, we have to harness those and use those and leverage them for the future. And hand in hand with that economic development, that responsible resource development, we have to have a taxation policy that encourages the economy to grow. And what we're seeing now is a government that's come in a very short amount of time. They've raised every tax and toll. HST is probably going to go up next week. And that's, as you know, has a dampening effect on the economy. I mean, these are the laws of economics. And we're seeing, unfortunately, what happens when you do certain things, when you increase taxation, when you shrink the economy, the result is very bad for New Brunswickers. And I'm afraid we're heading down that road. So I think what we need to do is embrace responsible resource development, bring Energy East, bring that pipeline here to New Brunswick in a responsible, environmentally friendly way, but to harness the potential of that Canadian oil to our port of St. John and our refinery there. And that's going to leverage those resources for the whole province. And we have to continue to use our resources, our mines, our traditional sectors to build this province.
That's incredible. They're raising the HST. What a counterproductive move. Last two questions. When is the leadership vote, and what is your website if people want to learn more about you?
So my website's Brian T. McDonald, all one word, .ca and .com, and that'll take you to my website. And the leadership vote's going to be, we'll find out this weekend. The date hasn't been set, but I believe it'll be this fall, so October, November. So we're about 9 months away. But I announced last week and have hit the ground running, and we're building a nice team here around the province, and I'm looking forward to a successful convention.
Great. Well, nice talking to you. I hope you're successful, and I hope New Brunswick is successful. It would be so affirming to Western Canadians, if we could, through this band of steel, unite the producers of oil in the West with the refiners and exporters of oil in New Brunswick, it's not just economics, it's national harmony. And I can tell you, as an Albertan in exile here in Toronto, that would bring great satisfaction and national pride to every Albertan and Saskatchewanian I know if we could fill your refinery and kick out the Saudis and Algerians or whoever else are filling it now. Brian, we got to go. Great to talk to you, and good luck in your campaign.
Thanks very much, Ezra. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Stay with us, folks. More on our special energy edition of the show after these words.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to therebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back to the program. Well, here's the thing. Everyone demonizes oil, and some people say, well, oil from Canada and pipelines are the lesser evil when compared to OPEC oil or shipping oil by rail or other means. I don't regard oil as evil at all. I believe it's the stuff of life that keeps us warm in the winter, lets us move around. It's the engine behind our entire Western civilization. It's replaced human power and animal power with machine power. I don't believe we should talk about oil as the lesser evil, but even for those who do, I believe they must agree that the Canadian way of producing and transporting oil is far superior to those in other places like OPEC. And joining me now via Skype from Langley, BC, is an environmental scientist and an environmentalist himself who has recently written a very thoughtful piece on Energy East from the point of view of an environmental pragmatist. His name is Blair King, and he joins us now. Blair, nice to meet you. Before we get into your defense of Energy East, tell our viewers just very briefly your background. You work every day in environmental remediation and environmental defense, I suppose, in real life, for industry, keeping it clean. Am I right?
Yes, I am a professional chemist and professional biologist. My work involves investigating and remediating industrial pollution. I look at old industrial and commercial facilities, identify what's wrong, clean them up, and make them available for the next users.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're based in Canada. Just out of curiosity, have you ever worked in other jurisdictions, either in the United States or in OPEC countries?
No, I have not. I have been working primarily on the West Coast here. I do work across the country, but my headquarters, our corporate headquarters is in Calgary, but I work here.
Fair enough. You know, it's whenever I talk to oilmen who travel around the world, who work in OPEC countries, even in the United States, they tell me how much more rigorous our Canadian standards are than foreign standards. But let's get to the argument that I noticed that brought you to our show today. Tell me your case as a pragmatic environmentalist, someone who doesn't just talk about the environment or once a year go, hey, hey, ho, ho, oil's got to go. Someone who makes his living cleaning up the messes. Why do you support Energy East?
Well, Energy East is, as you just mentioned earlier, we live in a society that is based on fossil fuels. As I pointed out, I am an environmentalist. I do believe in the concept of climate change. I do believe that we do need to move off of fossil fuels in the foreseeable future. That being said, that's the foreseeable future. we are not going to be off fossil fuels in the next 20 to 30 years. And if we have to use fossil fuels, we have to get them to us safely. And everyone who's worked in the field knows that the safest way to move petroleum hydrocarbons across long distances on land is pipelines. If we are going to live in a community that uses gasoline, we need to move it. And oil by rail is 4.5 times more, has 4.5 times more likelihood of having an incident. And when you have an incident, the results are far more catastrophic, as we've seen from places like Lac-Mégantic.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Lac-Mégantic, I was looking over my notes yesterday about that. I forgot how devastating it was. 47 people killed. I mean, we remember the footage of the explosion. I can't think of a pipeline explosion and fire in North America in my living memory that was anything so spectacular, because there's so many fail-safes. Things would be cut off, but there you had dozens and dozens of rail cars. I mean, correct my recollection if I'm wrong, has there been a catastrophic pipeline failure in North America in living memory that was as devastating as Lac-Mégantic?
Well, to my knowledge, no. There have been incidents, as you know, the Kalamazoo River, and frankly, just down the road here, when the Trans-Mountain, one of the Trans-Mountain laterals was accidentally dug up by a backhoe. The result, however, was an environmental cleanup and not devastation. They closed a lot of houses, a lot of people were inconvenienced, but we did not see any deaths.
Yeah, I mean, it was so, leaks, listen, you ship billions of liters of fluid a day. You're going to have some leaks. I mean, look underneath your car where it's parked in your garage. You're going to have a little bit of oil and gas drip there. I'm talking about the kind of catastrophes that oil, and I'm not against rail. I'm just saying, if you care about the environment, if you care about safety, bury the pipeline. Don't put it on rail. Okay, last word to you. I want to ask you, if the Energy East pipeline does not proceed, and I'm growing more and more skeptical as I see politicians and regulators pile on, we're not going to stop driving. We're not going to stop heating our homes, in many cases with home heating oil. We're not going to stop using energy. Where will that energy come from, Blair? And will it be as safe or as environmental as what's proposed here?
Right now, the pipeline, the refineries that Denis Coderre talks about in Montreal are being supplied via rail from the Bakken oil fields and via a 74-year-old pipeline that comes out of Maine and goes across to Montreal. So for the people of Montreal, they're going to be getting their oil from two of the least two methods. For the refineries in New Brunswick, they'll be continuing to use Saudi oil or oil from Algeria, oil from Nigeria, and frankly, as you know, the only good thing about buying oil from the Saudis is they then turn around and use that money to buy tanks and jeeps, as they've been called, from Canada. Yeah. But ultimately, that's the sources. We either buy from Canada or you buy from a third world or other countries where the work is not done as cleanly, where the money is not pushed back into Medicare and into public services in Canada.
Yeah. Blair King, what a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for giving us your view as a pragmatic environmentalist, someone who actually cleans up messes, doesn't just say, hey, hey, ho, ho, once a year, and then drives home in his gas-powered car to his gas-heated home. I appreciate the fact that you're living the life, not just talking the talk. Nice to meet you. Stay with us. After this break, your viewer comments to me.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to therebel.media/themegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out. Welcome back to the show. My favorite part is your viewer feedback. Zia Carl writes, why do Albertans in the West always have to pay the price? Because they are doormats and lack gumption. Prosperity in the USA await, and all it would take is some initiative. Well, you know, when people talk about Stephen Harper's legacy as Prime Minister, they usually talk about economic success and they talk about foreign policy, things like that. But as Sherlock Holmes once said, sometimes it's the dog that doesn't bark that's important. What was not an issue under Harper was a national unity crisis, which really was the hallmark of so many Liberal and PC governments before him. It's even hard to remember them all, isn't it? The Meech Lake crisis, the Charlottetown Accord crisis, Quebec referendum crises. It never stopped until Stephen Harper took over, 9 years of constitutional peace. And not just in Quebec, the West, which had a full-blown separatist movement too, felt like equals in Confederation. Well, it's been barely 90 days since Justin Trudeau was elected Prime Minister, and already national unity is taking a beating. Montreal Liberals are beating up the West, both Alberta and Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick, which also wants the Energy East pipeline. They're just thrown under the bus too. What is so sad is that the Liberals profit from this. They create a national unity crisis, and then they offer themselves up as the only people who can solve it. They actually love this stuff. Rick Plesnick writes, definitely could be a power play to extort and pillage the West. The Libranos are back. Not that the Libranos have ever done anything like this before. Remember Chrétien? Look, there's something congenital about Quebec Liberals in their very DNA. They despise the West. I don't know. Is it ethnic tribalism? Is it an inferiority complex? Is it just plain greed or jealousy? I don't know. But I do know this. When Stephen Harper became PM, he was aware of his weaknesses in Quebec. He lavished Quebec with money and attention. He even always started his press conferences speaking en français. He kept this up year after year, even though Quebec never elected more than a handful of Conservative MPs. Harper tried hard and was never deterred. Now compare that to how Trudeau and Coderre and the old Bombardier lobbyist crew and all the Libranos, just piggies at the trough. They don't care about the West, and they don't care who knows. Lloyd Nolan writes, Ezra, on February the 12th, are you going to have an anniversary special? Hi, Lloyd. The Sun News Network shut down on February 13th, and the Rebel News Network started on February 16th, if I recall. So that's our first anniversary. You know, we produced more than 2,500 videos, and we've had literally millions of visits to our website and views of our videos. For sure, we're going to mark the occasion, so make sure to tune in. Well, that's it for me, folks. Thanks so much for watching all week. I hope you enjoy the show. Keep coming back over the weekend. We'll have more for you then. Until then, you keep fighting for freedom. Bye-bye.